What's going on, guys? Let me go ahead and break this down for you guys before we get started. Let me give you guys a brief overview of the outline of what I plan to discuss today. Kind of let you guys have an idea of where this is going and what I'm trying to accomplish here. Hopefully this kind of lays out something you can follow, because a lot of this content is very technical. Some of it is actually, some is a little less technical. It kind of varies. I try to include some relatable content as well that I'll run through that I hope makes this a lot easier to understand of where I'm coming from, what approach I'm taking. I figured it'd be appropriate for me to start off with a section on cognitive dissonance. Let's dive right into it. Okay, so before we dive into this outline, let me summarize what I'm trying to accomplish here. The way this video came about, it is an extension of my previously dropped video, part 1 of Stellar, Network, and Swift, right? So a lot of this ties around the whole concept of the messaging system. Before I get there, the reason this video came about is because I'm trying to help really drive the idea that there's more to these layers of blockchain and DLT technology than just a token. What you're going to see here today is it's going to make it undeniably apparent that IBM and Stellar are at the center of this financial revolution. There's a lot of discussions ongoing about XRP and its role and its purpose, and that's a lot of this video. Where this video is going is to really show you guys that it does not necessarily mean XRP. So that's one of the main concepts I want to drive here, and I'm going to show you why, hopefully in this video, exactly why that concept is so vital to what I'm trying to show here. Alright, so when it comes to investing, cognitive dissonance can cause investors to fail to recognize information that could help them make a good investment decision because they don't want to admit that they made a poor decision in the first place. At times, an investor's need to maintain self-esteem may prevent him or her from learning from mistakes. To ameliorate the dissonance arising from the pursuit of what they perceive to be two incompatible goals, self-validation and acknowledgement of past mistakes, investors will often attribute their failures to chance rather than to poor decision making on their part, right? So, however, people who miss opportunities to learn from past miscalculations are likely to miscalculate again, renewing a cycle of anxiety, discomfort, dissonance, and denial. At a macro level, this behavior can affect thousands or even millions of investors and can drive market volatility. This is a very common and very human characteristic, and this concept is ever present in the world of investment decision making. Okay, on to the next part, right? Cognitive dissonance is a byproduct of cognitive bias. Humans often act irrational and unexpected ways when it comes to business decisions, money, and finance. Behavioral finance tries to explain the difference between what economic theory predicts people will do and what they actually do in the heat of the moment. Oftentimes, this comes down to the specific biases people tend to have. And I'm seeing this a lot right now in the digital asset space, with things just going sideways for so long, and being in a bear market for so long. People are slowly turning the other way and trying to take the safer route, but we are at the point in the investment game where this is where you want to take the route that seems the least safe, right? You know, although it's hard to time, and although you want to be able to make smart decisions, at this point we are close to the turning point, so it's going to get harder to stick to what you believe is true. So don't think that you're wrong by not believing yourself. You know, continue to trust what you know and stick to it no matter what. Okay, so there are two main types of biases, and so I'll just cover those two for this section, because I can go on and on this, but this isn't about that. I just want to touch on these topics. so that you keep those in mind as we go forward, right? So these are two main types of bias. There are two main types of biases that people commit, causing them to deviate from rational decision making, and those two are cognitive and emotional. Cognitive errors result from incomplete information or the inability to analyze the information that is available. Okay, so that's a very important topic. Okay, so this is what I'm seeing right now, a lot of, right? Because I've been in this space for a couple years, and it's led me to review the same information over and over again. However, by continuing to persevere and remain as objective as possible, I've been able to peel back the layers every time a little more, and it's led me to uncover more truths, right? So although the emotional aspect of it on my end has been under control, that's really the driver as to why I've been able to proceed with peeling back these layers at the level that I'm about to show. This is very important because processing errors occur when an individual fails to manage and organize information properly, which can be due in part to the mental effort required to compute and analyze the data. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep that into our notes because that's a very important topic, okay? And I'll show you how to overcome this as well. Right? I'll give you some tips on how to overcome this. Alright, so the rest, I'm going to give you guys a link to this. You guys can read up on your own. I just wanted to touch on a couple things so that we can keep a couple things in mind as we go forward. Money is an information system, right? It's a way to reallocate resources and also control obligations in time, right? So when you think about money as information and data, now this leads to a lot of challenges that people completely overlook because they're blinded by the money. They're blinded by getting that coin that makes them rich. While that is the goal for me, the only reason that I understand this information at the level that I do is because in my professional career, I have actually hit a roadblock in my ability to grow anymore, because systems that I've created have hit a point where the IT infrastructure set up and network set up has now become the limit, has now become the bottleneck. And given that I work for such a huge corporation, these massive enterprise systems, it's so hard for them to even want to think about changing how they do things. So this is gonna bleed into where IBM is basically grabbing the market, and that is how do you revolutionize a financial system while taking into account all of the legacy systems that exist. The important thing here to know is not the revolution that's going to take place with how things are going to conspire with the financial system. That's coming. But the key thing is who is going to be able to provide the bridge from legacy markets, legacy transitional systems, and help modernize them without causing too much of chaos, right? Without being too much of a challenge, whether it's a phased approach or whether it's infrastructure upgrades, whatever it is. Whoever can help that transition is the next market, the next immediate need. There's a lot of utility that's coming from these tokens, but you gotta also think about how you're gonna be applying that utility in the timeline of how we're gonna be upgrading our systems. Because if we can't bridge these legacy systems, the system has to be an entire system as one. It's not gonna do you any good if you have some banking systems that are modernized while you have other countries that are legacy systems. It's just not gonna work, because the bulk of the economy is all about goods and services. It's all about goods and services. It's all about the people. So if you read about this kind of talks into some of the really, the core banking transformation challenges is the title of this. So let me read through this real quick. In order for banks to address the industry challenges A core banking modernization is required. So that's a very important topic. So I'm going to keep that here for you guys. Right. So, but complex applications and infrastructures can hinder a bank's ability to effectively deliver new products and systems and services critical to the business. Some of these challenges include bank IT infrastructures are complex and heterogeneous, duplicate systems are redundant, processes are often manual and error prone, traditional core banking systems are difficult to support. Given financial and time pressures, many banks chose to take shortcuts and apply quick fixes rather than address the underlying product-based architectural and governance issues. So that's a very important topic right here, right? Because a lot of the modern digital asset companies have taken this approach, and mainly one of the big ones is one of the big drivers and differentiators between Ripple and Stellar is that Stellar is backed by IBM, and IBM is solving these underlying mechanisms and foundational issues, as opposed to just keeping everything where you can modify it quickly, right? So you give one, it's a trade-off. All right. So maintaining the existing systems in good working order consumes a major portion of IT budgets and also causes time to market issues. Challenged to support today's banking reporting requirements, that's another big one, right? And that's the idea of, this is a lot harder than you guys think. And people always talk about, oh, ISO 22, ISO 222. All that is it's a language that the computer and the servers use to communicate. It's a standard set of different languages and combinations that these servers and computers share when they communicate, so that everybody's on the same page. And it kind of revolves around the compliance. What people don't understand is that this information, as it's upgrading, as the compliance is coming into play, it's more information that's required to be provided, which is more data. That's the problem that's going on right now. It's a data problem. It's not a money problem, right? It's not that there's things to solve with the money aspect. It's the data issue. It's a big data issue. Given the high cost of implementing a replacement project, business problems are often not addressed comprehensively, and a componentized, I can't really say that word, solution provides the best chance of success. The transformation roadmap includes a prioritization of individual solution components, which augments the chance. So this ties into the embedded software set of things, and let's move forward. Wanted to give you guys a good idea of the issues that are actually happening right now within the data world, right? And what's actually happening with these companies as more regulations are coming into play. So this is going to bleed into the topics such as ISO 22 and some of these other data related markets. I'm going to jump into blockchain stack layers. So this is where we talk about a little more info, or this is where we give a little more of a breakdown on kind of the background on blockchain stacks and layers and how it all comes together. This kind of helps paint the picture for the conversations regarding IBM and how that's going to come into play. It's very important to understand the infrastructure and how this comes together, because this is going to determine ultimately what digital assets make it, what networks survive, etc., etc. All right, so you could think of IBM as a blockchain as a service to control the nodes. So this is an important concept, because this is all going to tie into another important topic, which is the Genesis block, which I will get into shortly as well. But before that, let's take a look at how blockchain comes together. A lot of people fail to recognize that there's multiple layers to how this comes together. It's not just blockchain and digital assets. Like, it's not that simple. There's a lot of depth to this topic. As you can see here, if we dive into this first picture, you're always going to have multiple layers that stack on each other. At the base, you have an infrastructure layer, Second, above that, you have an overlaying network layer. Then you have your protocol layer, your services and optional components, and also your application layer, which is the front end of these applications in which we interact with as users. So as we dive into this, you're going to see that the reason IBM has become so important is because they've established themselves almost like a full stack, where they're involved in every single part of the underlying infrastructure and setup for stacking these blockchain networks. But more so, they've established themselves in the infrastructure layer, right? So every single piece of this, every single component to these layered stacks can be modular, right? So the network layer can be switched out, the protocol layer can be switched out to different types that comply with whatever the stack allows. However, the infrastructure layer is the most important, because the infrastructure is what holds down the entire blockchain network as a whole for the global financial system. Okay, so by infrastructure, we'll dive into that shortly, but here are some more pictures, right? You have this kind of breaks it up a little differently. You have your technology stack, goes a little bit into the properties that they hold, and then you have your token types, which is your payment tokens, utility, and investment tokens. A lot of people tend to think that I'm referring to tokens when I'm referring to the Stellar network, but in reality, that's not what I'm talking about, right? So the Stellar network in itself, as you can see here, can be placed in this network layer, okay? And the infrastructure layer involves this Stellar network as well, and you're going to see how in a little bit, but mainly for the compliance and governance of the entire system, because the underlying infrastructure and network IT architecture is moving to a peer-to-peer distributed database infrastructure, in which Stellar established a protocol that will maximize on those parameters. IBM has embedded themselves in every single portion of this infrastructure layer, so that it establishes a foundation in which other currencies and other CBDCs and digital asset projects can build on this stack. Then you have your network and protocol layer. This is where you have your consensus, sidechains, permission management. So you could think of RippleNet here, right? And you can think of the XRPL here, as it's utilizing sidechains, right, to basically tap into payment channels and state channels. Those are two important concepts that we'll dive into here shortly as well, right? But you can see where that lays in the layers of how blockchain comes together. And at the infrastructure layer, we're going to see where the network comes into play, where the storage comes into play, and even computation. Because as I mentioned earlier, this is a data issue. This isn't a currency money problem, right? This is a big data issue that we're having to deal with. Right, so here's just some more images. You got smart contracts, storage data, blockchain, server infrastructure. So let me, for the time being, what I'm going to do is we will continue to pull aside certain concepts, right, that are important. That's definitely one of them that we'll come back and tie into shortly. This concept of GDPR is another important concept. Okay, so as mentioned, here's some more images that can help kind of explain this, but what I really want to get into is this right here. This is an important one. So tying back to this whole infrastructure layer, the infrastructure layer here that I'm referring to is at the foundational level, which is the internet TCP/IP infrastructure. Okay, so this is an important topic because this is where IBM comes into play in full force. And it's going to bring up the topic of what's called red books. Okay, so I'll put that here. We'll talk about that later. But to give you an idea, red books, if you go to IBM and you search red books, it's going to pull up this. There's a good explanation right here. The TCP/IP protocol suite has become the de facto standard for computer communications in today's network world. The TCP/IP tutorial XY, etc., etc. Mainly, Redbooks was one of the discoveries that I made that helped really opened up my eyes to what's actually going on here. It's going to bring in the network that overpowers the Swift network, which we'll talk about shortly. The numbers are staggering, but this topic will come up shortly, but just keep this in mind. The TCP/IP infrastructure leads us to IBM Redbooks. So as I'm starting to peel this back, you can start to kind of see how there's layers that need to be peeled back when you guys are studying that, a lot of people don't even touch on. And that's what's really going to start distinguishing those that really understand this versus those that don't. It's a lot deeper than just what's on the front end, right? There's a lot of back end work that needed to take place or be set up. In other words, that needs, in order for the system to work the way we're idealizing it to do, right? So keep this in mind. IBM Redbooks is a very big topic that we'll come back to a lot here in the next couple sections. So and then that'll also bleed into what's called the Genesis block, generating a first new block on the first blockchain-based ledger that identifies the first client and the first collateral associated with the first token. So if I go back here to where it talks about blockchain as a service to control the nodes, this ties into the idea of the Genesis block. As you can see here, this is a DLT, pulled this from a DLT pattern, and there's more important aspects than just the payment aspect to it, right? There's a database that needs to be accounted for, in which globally the state of each transaction is managed. On top of that, so this is for managing the state, which allows you to implement smart contracts. When it comes to auditing and chain of custody and really getting a cash trail for how the money is playing out, this is where blockchain specializes in if you use it correctly. Now, the Genesis block is important because the Genesis block really helps identify the opening node to a new network, and can help you really trace back the linearity of these transactions to get you to a point where you can where you can basically audit this entire cash trail to see if anything has been, if a transaction is considered off or on chain, or really just identify the validity of a transaction in general. And this is what comes into play when you're talking about anti-money laundering policies and that nature. But in the case that I'm trying to refer to here is that when you set up an infrastructure layer, the network layer comes next, right? And the Genesis block is a way of tying into the infrastructure layer by really just allowing that first Genesis block to be the new chain for whatever network is tying into the main network or the main infrastructure layer. In the world state database, and that will bleed into Hyperledger. Here I have some more info on some patents on the Genesis block. So blocks hold batches of valid transactions that are hashed and encoded into a Merkle tree. The linked blocks form a chain. This iterative process confirms the integrity of the previous blocks all the way back to the initial block, which is known as the Genesis block. To ensure the integrity of a block and the data contained in it, the block is usually digitally signed. Right, so we'll come back to this, but this is a good topic because it's going to come into play as we talk about the compliance of things and how these networks are being audited for validity. Okay, so Ripple doesn't mean XRP. So what I mean by that is every time you guys see an article that mentions Ripple or RippleNet or anything regarding DLT, it seems that people are quick to jump to conclusions and just assume that it's talking about XRP, but the reality is that it's not true. So beyond the topic of this, I have a section included in this video where I'm going to go through just real life examples of exactly what I mean, and it's going to become very clear that every time you see Ripple, it doesn't mean XRP, and you're going to see that here shortly, and it's going to be undeniable after you realize that the whole time it hasn't really been talking about XRP. So in this section, I kind of tied these two pictures of a question that was asked to ChatGPT. I thought that would be helpful in kind of explaining what I'm talking about here. And it ties back to this central theme of the blockchain layers. First question here that was asked, does Ripple utilize the Lumen? Yes, Ripple, known as XRP, is a cryptocurrency that utilizes the Lumen as its unit of account. The Lumen is the native asset of the Stellar network, of which Ripple is a part. Ripple is used as a digital currency for near instant, low-cost international payments and is often used by financial institutions as a bridge currency to facilitate the exchange of different currencies. Ripple plays a part on Stellar. Second question, Ripple plays a part on Stellar? Yes, that's correct. Ripple was built on the Stellar network and uses the Stellar consensus protocol to reach consensus among its network participants. The Stellar network is an open source decentralized protocol for digital currency to fiat currency transfers, which allows cross-border transactions between any pair of currencies. Ripple uses Stellar network to facilitate low-cost, near-instant payments between countries and currencies. This is important because this is gonna bleed into what I mentioned about the real-life examples of every time you see Ripple, it doesn't mean XRP. Now, this is not necessarily saying that it's built on the Stellar network directly, but it's built on it in the sense that there's infrastructure that's underlying the entire system of this protocol, in which is relying on components that belong strictly and solely to the Stellar network and IBM blockchain, i.e. fiat currency transfers or fiat currency conversion. Here's another one. Ripple built both its private ledger and the CBDC platform on the XRP ledger, and the private ledger is based on the XRPL but does not require XRP to operate. A Ripple spokesman told Blockworks in an email, central banks using the CBDC platform do not use or interact with XRP. And we'll touch on why, but one important thing to know is the XRPL has certain requirements, certain hardware requirements. And that's how this topic will tie back into this, but we'll touch back on that later. But I'll note it because it's very important. Just kind of tying back to this idea of instant payments between countries and currencies. So this is where Stellar Network is going to come into play. Stellar Network has positioned himself as an open network to more closely resemble the idea of cash, right? An open network where anybody can use the system. That's exactly how cash is supposed to be replicated. And this brings in the topic of IBM is actually at the center of this entire financial instrument as a whole. So the whole idea of path payments, for example, is a currency swap. And I did some research and I figured out that the World Bank and IBM actually implemented the first global currency swap. This whole idea of path payments, obviously, you cannot say that Ripple and XRP is the token for payments because the infrastructure that's underlying it. So I included some PDFs here that kind of go into detail on when this happened. This was back in 1981. So pioneering new ways to raise funds, the World Bank Treasury entered into the world's first formal currency swap agreement in 1981 with U.S. technology giant IBM as its counterpart. This whole idea of pathfinding for payments and fiat currency transfers, there's already a trail here that it's been an underlying theme that IBM was already taking a part of since the 80s. So, and we'll go into this furthermore, but let's keep moving, right? So just touching back to the whole idea of Stellar and IBM being at the base. So here, just the title alone gives this away. Stellar XLM to serve $1 trillion stablecoin market as the base layer, providing fast and secure real-time payments. Now, this ties back to exactly what this is referring to. This is what this whole ChatGPT discussion was about. It's building everything on top of the Stellar network to ensure the compliance aspect of things, right? The regulations, the governance network is what's going to control the compliance side of things, in which leads to ultimately the conversion to cash. And being able to convert to cash is what the usable monetary purpose of this entire instrument is. there's no point in having a token without being able to convert it to cash. And that's exactly where Stellar and IBM are going to step in at, and that's what's going to help them dominate this market. Just continuing on, so more notes here. Not every article is about XRP. 95% of the time an article is referenced, it is not about XRP. So one claim that the XRP community makes about Ripple and XRP that I think a lot of people got it wrong is that as Ripple is expanding their banking network, with more coming on board, the belief is that they will utilize XRP. So there's a key component that will come out of the rest of this discussion, and that is the concept of cash and currency exchange, as I was mentioning earlier, with IBM being involved and being basically at the center of what a currency swap entails. This will all bleed off the whole topic of having a gross settlement system, a retail / wholesale hybrid system, in which money is now being able to track in real time, because we've solved a lot of the issues that comes with big data and handling big data. But ultimately, there's going to be a deciding factor, right? So let's put ourselves in the shoes of these banks, right? Let's say that we're using the Ripple network. We have the choice to use XRP, which we could. Let's say we do. There's no point in utilizing the XRP token when the infrastructure itself that I'm using for my core banking system is direct product of IBM. So the only incentive here to use XRP would be if it would save me money and would be more efficient to make transactions, right? Now, where IBM and Stellar have taken advantage of this market is that if you use IBM products at your infrastructure layer, to implement your blockchain network, why am I going to go off chain to convert to cash when I can just utilize the built-in currency exchange mechanism, which settles and clears in real time on one network with Stellar in this case? Why would I go out of line just to pay more to use a token that isn't as efficient as using the token that's built into the existing infrastructure that I'm actually using? So that's where this importance is going to come into play. Another claim is that XRP will be all the money. The true reality is that this is incorrect, because Ripple needs Stellar, while Stellar doesn't really need XRP or Ripple. But at the end of the day, they both need IBM. So why not? Let's think a little bit, right? So Swift itself, right, is the messaging network right now in play that's already established all these relationships with banking networks. So it has a relationship, has 11,000 bank and financial institutions using its platform already as it is. That surpasses Ripple's 200 banks by a long shot. Okay, so one discovery that I made that really threw me for a loop was regarding IBM already having an existing infrastructure of 16,000 banks in their network, along with financial institutions that already utilize their core banking platform, right? So if you want proof of this, here's a paper for IBM's Red Books that I was mentioning earlier. It says it directly here. This defines why 16,000 banks worldwide are powered by the IBM eServer iSeries system, installed over 16,000 banks worldwide, right? This iSeries system has the world's most diverse independent software vendor banking solutions portfolio. The iSeries system offers bank executives unparalleled freedom to choose the best applications for their banking needs. It provides integrated one platform, one network. Why go out of that network? Why go off chain to make things more difficult when you can do it all on the same network? This not only increases efficiency, which decreases transaction fees, transaction speeds, also provides a safer option for you to perform your transactions in a more reliable network, because the existing infrastructure that you're using would do it on chain. Okay, now continuing on, so the XRPL. One thing I've noticed is what you really got to do is you got to pay attention to the wording when you're reading a lot of these articles, right? Because there's a lot more that's beneath the hood than you're anticipating. Let's take this quick example and Here, after this section in particular, or the next couple sections, I'm going to dive into IBM and give a little more background info. This is kind of just a teaser, but basically, if you go and you look at the XRPL, so in order to become a validator, there are some system requirements. Here you go. So the XRP ledger. If you notice here, operating system Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So immediately, if you do some digging on Red Hat and the IBM acquisition, IBM acquired Red Hat for about $34 billion. So that's the first thing right off the bat. The second thing you got to look at is for the CPU, Intel Exon, or I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but 3 gigahertz processor with 8+ cores and hyper-threading enabled. So that's the next bit. If you look at directly on the IBM website, you'll be able to find that they're basically integrating this all together as a full system. If you look at the website, you'll immediately notice that IBM and Intel also have another partnership where Intel is basically teaming up with IBM on their IBM cloud network. So that explains this portion of it, right? So we see another tie being brought back directly to IBM, where IBM is again maximizing on their capabilities of having a very wide spectrum in this computer system market. Now let's continue going forward. Let me scroll some of these up. Challenges with enterprise data. So there's 3 states of data at any point in time. This will tie into what will be Hyperledger and the world state database. So first off, right, so enterprise data exists in one of the 3 states. So you have data at rest, which is typically data that sits on a storage device. You got data in transit, data being sent across 2 locations. So actively sending data is another state of which data is sitting at. Data in use. So all right, so ISO 22. There's a lot of misconceptions on what ISO 2022 is. The reality is the definition is a lot more simpler than people think or people make it seem. ISO 22 is a global standard for financial messaging that aims to standardize electronic data between financial institutions. So what is it in layman terms? It's basically a language that these servers, you can say, use or computer systems utilize this language to communicate so that they're on the same terms when they're making certain types of transactions. And in this case, this particular language seems to be the compliance language, which they've called ISO 2022. Basically what that is just a messaging system in which the metadata and ledger headers, the information that's provided with amongst each other, is something that is a requirement per compliance, and in particular because it provides information or insights into the transactions that you're committing, so as to be able to create some sort of audit trail when it comes to running anti-money laundering algorithms through the transactions and being able to verify on-chain versus off-chain data, basically. So if I continue to read here, it provides a structured way of exchanging data for financial transactions, including payments, securities, and trade services. The International Organization of Standardization developed the standard, which is being adopted by countries and financial institutions worldwide. Real-time payments, for example, have widely adopted ISO 2022 across many countries, and wire payment networks are also announcing their support plans. So there's challenges between implementing ISO 2022. This really starts to increase the overall amount of storage and processing capacity that these companies are needing to inquire in order to meet the overall ISO 2022 regulation standard. This is a process that has to be implemented, and now that it's increasing the capacity, but at the same time, it's increased payment efficiency, but it's having to increase the storage in which a lot of these messaging standards are having to use to cooperate. So what that's doing to these legacy systems is that it's having them, it's making these legacy systems have to evolve. And the way this is headed, the direction, and this is headed where IBM is stepping in towards a phased IBM approach. Is stepping in to be that link of, hey, we're going to help you get your data to compliance so that you can run your business as the enterprise that it's supposed to be, without having to worry about keeping up with the requirements for keeping a compliant payment system due to ISO 2022 standards. So if you can see here, for payment systems to leverage ISO 2022, the architecture must support ISO 22 data to those components that can leverage the expanded data sets, including fraud system, sanction screening, regulatory reporting, and payments archive. So those just those few variables alone increase this data capacity exponentially. And this is where a new market is being born that not many companies have the capabilities of coming in and helping legacy systems, because of the fact that IBM is so dialed into the computer system game since the 80s, earlier than that most likely. So let's continue, right? So furthermore, ISO 22 enables interoperability between different payment systems, which is critical in today's global financial ecosystem. ISO 2022 was developed in 2004. This was known as the Universal Financial Industry Message Scheme. Here it talks a little bit about the ISO 22, and what it was meant to be was a universal financial industry messaging system. Encapsulate securities, financial services, etc. That now, if we come back and we go to IBM website, where it discusses a lot of the ISO 2022. This is IBM, right? IBM is basically marketing at themselves as the company that's going to help you. You're an enterprise. Let me help you. Let me come in and help you make sure that your payment systems are going to support the ISO 22 standard. And if they do not, we have different options for you. Some of those are on the cloud, and some of those are on premise, with things like our Z16 system, in which I'll touch on shortly as well. But we offer the business. We're in the business of being able to help your company meet all the compliance requirements without you having to worry about putting in extra extraneous efforts from your teams. All right, let's jump into now the next section, which is called that key differentiator for Stellar. So here I go into some more details that kind of outline some of the key advantages that Stellar has as a payment network. So diving into Stellar, one of the key aspects of it, of course, will be the entire notion of IBM and its goal to provide a universal payments. Okay, so as you can see here, universal trade capture, universal payment network, universal identifier codes, universal product code, universal blockchain payment solution, and if you recall from the previous, you have things such as ISO, which is attempting to be the universal financial industry messaging scheme, as you can see here from the official 2004 publication, ISO 2022. Okay, so just jumping back, this is a very important paper, and the first part that I published about 6 months ago. I'm gonna go into this one in a little, only because it's necessary to really understand where Stellar stands with the whole payment industry. So if you didn't watch my first video, I'll include the link in the description below, but for the most part, follow along as I read through it again. So this one is called Fast and Secure Global Payments with Stellar, and it looks to have Jen Michaela's name on there. international expensive actually, in part because of multi-hop payment routing through heterogeneous. So Stellar is designed basically to be a new global payment network that can directly transfer digital money anywhere in the world in seconds. The key innovation is a secure transaction mechanism across untrusted intermediaries using a new Byzantine agreement protocol called Stellar Consensus Protocol. So here's some topics to dig into if you want to read about this paper. While there will always be compliance costs, evidence suggests a significant amount is lost to lack of competition, which is exacerbated by inefficient technology. Where people can innovate, prices and latencies go down. So in this case, think about having a level playing field where not only is it fair for the people that are involved or take part in this financial system, where people can innovate in their businesses without having to worry about the medium of basic. An open global payment network that attracts innovation and competition from non-bank entities could drive down costs and latencies at all layers, including compliance. So this is a very important statement, because the way that opening up a network to more users could really drive down costs is that you would be able to distribute basically, like, think about the intermediaries and think about them being more distributed and available. So there would be more supply, right, of intermediaries. Stellar is a blockchain-based payment network specifically designed to facilitate innovation and competition in international payments. Stellar is the first system to meet all three of the following goals: open membership, issuer enforced finality, and cross-issuer atomacy. Okay, so the Stellar blockchain has two distinguishing properties. First, it natively supports efficient markets between tokens and different issuers. Specifically, anyone can issue a token. The blockchain provides a built-in order book for trade between any pair of tokens, and users can issue path payments that atomically trade across several currency pairs while guaranteeing an end-to-end limit price. Now, this is a very technical significance here, so it's hard to point out, but as I mentioned, the key word is efficient and natively. So one of the things about the Stellar blockchain is that it can only be powered by transactions that are performed by the lumens. The way the protocol is designed to be an open system yet a closed infrastructure, given that IBM steps in and provides the hardware to allow for the end-to-end finality to be as efficient as possible. That's the key driver to all of this. It's all about efficiency, because efficiency can lead to sub-zero transaction payments or differences in sub-zero transaction payments, which in reality, when we're talking about quadrillions and trillions of dollars, that is a very significant amount. And so we need to start thinking with a more macro perspective, in the sense that how big is this financial system? So second, Stellar introduces a new Byzantine agreement protocol, which is the Stellar Consensus Protocol, through which token issuers designate specific validator servers to enforce transaction finality. Okay, keep going forward. This is another important one that I talked about in my first video. So the system described in this paper is collectively our third attempt to realize a decentralized payment network. The idea of a true decentralized payment network will start to become more and more apparent as we start diving into more stuff regarding IBM and BIS, for example. The BIS is full of discussions of the reality of a good solid payment network to be at the center of the financial system, in which it can really help even drive out old practices such as fractional banking or fractional reserve lending, which is when banks are basically issuing out more money than the deposits that they hold in their bank. A lot of it's going to tie into the fact that we don't have a true payment network system that accounts for all of that data in real time. Okay, while still in existence, we believe Ripple cannot realize the vision of a truly open payment network for both governance and technical reasons. Okay, so the governance aspect of it is going to be you need to have like a 80% or 90% agreement with the UNLs, and then the technical reasons being due to the fact that as the compliance and regulations are coming in, it's requiring more data to be shared across different mediums. So the technical aspect of this is that there is actually hardware infrastructure that needs to be upgraded in order to really realize the true payment system. The governance reasons derive from tension between shareholders' interest, because Ripple is a for-profit company, which actually is a big difference, and network users, but are beyond the scope of this paper. The technical issue is that Ripple's Byzantine Agreement Protocol requires nearly closed membership. One of the key aspects of Stellar's Byzantine Protocol, it was designed to revolve around a peer-to-peer network architecture, distributed architecture, which is basically computer systems and how they're interacting. This alone sets it apart from Ripple because of Ripple's closed membership foundation. It's just the way it's set up on the governance level. It's the way the protocol agreement is designed to function. And David Schwartz actually talks about this because he believes, or they believe, that it's important to have more, how could you say it, more control into who is able to join as a UNL, as opposed to having a system where you can have people who are basically willing to commit fraud openly enter so easily. But this closes them off significantly from developers because it really does slow down the time it takes you to get to market, which is very important, especially nowadays where everybody wants everything to be fast. And you need it to be fast. You need it to be fast and agile and nimble. By compartmentalizing the network into quorums, you're able to create a network that, as you scale, you can actually become more efficient and overall just more effective in terms of transaction speeds, and the developers can easily come in and out a lot quicker to deploy their business solutions without having to worry about too many hurdles to go through. That's really what that's about. So now to just expand on that idea of scalability, we have another important concept, which is the concept of anti-fragility. The Stellar network is designed to be anti-fragile. And what anti-fragility entails in this application, let me show you a quick clip from McAfee discussing malware and just his perspective and thoughts on cybersecurity in that aspect.
You know, I let people hack me. I published the phone, my personal phone number in Business Insider magazine last year. And my wife is here. She can tell you that for weeks the phone rang nonstop 24 hours a day. However, every hacker in the world has my number now. They also have my email address. Please try and hack me. It's not a challenge. I want to see what you're doing. I want to see the newest tech. I want to see the newest technology in data theft. And for a hacker, it's a badge of honor to be able to hack a leading cybersecurity figure, or like myself, for example. So that's what happens. People get into my phone. My phone has more malware on it than the entire library of Kaspersky Laboratories, because I invite everybody in. And now I've lost your original.
So that's what we got here. McAfee discussing kind of the same concept of anti-fragility. The point of the Stellar network is that you want to contain bad actors. You don't want to completely eliminate them or keep them out, because it limits your ability to adapt to just different styles and changes that hackers seem to implement. Okay, so the rest of this basically goes into more technical info that discusses Stellar Core's transaction processing capabilities. And it has to do, this all ties back to what I mentioned earlier, where the actual hardware behind Stellar Core's design has been taken into consideration. So by actually implementing it on a it's called an distributed peer-to-peer architecture network. So if you want more information, you can look that up, but basically talks about what a peer-to-peer architecture system would be structured like. So this holds a lot of the answers as to why the Stellar core is able to offer such very highly efficient and scalable, such as the Stellar payment network to be built upon. So Stellar Endgame, what is it? So the importance of this, as mentioned, is it's hard for the world's financial system to function on one network. And the reason for that is because we're talking about big data here. We're not talking about money. This is a data issue, okay? And by just having an open network in which the actual developers can perform transactions on that same network creates an efficiency unlike any other, especially when it comes to trading systems and also just developing apps and applications in general. It's so efficient to just have the in-house currency exchange with your system. And that's where the universal payment solution idea from IBM really starts to come into play. Here I talk a little more about IBM. As I mentioned earlier, think of IBM embedded software being at endpoints. Lumens is the only token that can be used on Stellar to power the network based on the SCP, in which they can realize a true payment system because Stellar focused on building their consensus protocol around a peer-to-peer network architecture. Okay, so diving into the next section, to give you guys a little bit of background info, here's where IBM Big Blue comes into the picture. Touching back on the layers of blockchain and the different topology, you have infrastructure. So basically, what I'm going to start doing now is tying everything back to IBM. So starting with this section, so the infrastructure first of all, which is the processing power and storage. So we'll touch on a system that's called IBM Z, right? Z16. So this is a basically a server that you can buy as an enterprise to launch a very powerful foundational infrastructure to create an enterprise that's designed around efficiency, because you have the integrated software to support not only storage, but it tying into also the entire idea of a hybrid cloud. So this is just a key aspect of when it comes to enterprises. So protocols, the rules that achieve consensus and security. So in this case, we could think about IBM, Stellar Network, ISO, and compliance. ISO being a messaging standard in which IBM is actually the hardware that is required for you to integrate it into your company in order to meet ISO compliance. And then you have Stellar Network, which is going to provide the governance for the foundation or the underlying mechanism of the financial system, which will be based around a system that's a hybrid between a retail and a wholesale system, where you can act sort of as both, depending on permission and permissionless networks. But at the end of the day, it'll all be governed at the core by the Stellar Network, which will provide an open governance network to actually realize the whole concept of an open financial system. Services, functions, or applications. This is IBM just allowing the functions to happen, and then interfaces, the mechanisms such as APIs that allow interaction with other technologies. An example of this is going to be the IBM Financial Transaction Manager, and you're going to see here shortly how this basically all ties back to Swift and everything they're doing on their end to meet compliance, and you're going to see how it's actually IBM under the hood this entire time. So IBM, aka Big Blue, a little background on IBM. For those that aren't familiar with IBM, it's a big international company it's present in over 175 countries, specializes in computer, hardware, middleware, and software, and provides hosting and consulting services in areas ranging from mainframe computers to nanotechnology. IBM is the largest industrial research organization in the world and consistently has the record for the most patents every year when it comes to technology. So you're going to see they've been in this game for a long time. A very important aspect is this right here. This is what people overlook, and this is exactly what sets IBM apart, and this is what's going to allow for the realization of a true payment network where you can actually track all payments in real time, because you can actually track the cash. Tracking the cash transaction helps you keep a balanced system, because you know exactly what's coming in and what's coming out at the time that it's happening. So IBM has been responsible for several technological innovations, including the automated teller machine, behind the floppy disk, hard drive, the magnetic stripe card, the UPC barcode. So just this alone gives you insight into how much leverage IBM has, because it actually has the end-to-end point access to this information and data at the moment that it's actually being captured. So this next section is important and significant because it's going to give insight into the background of IBM and exactly how I was able to tie everything back to IBM that I'm seeing out in the news regarding DLTs, anything involving digital assets, etc. So IBM has been building DLT products on top of Stellar. How do the relationships work? Okay, so IBM client DLT needs private and public networks. So that's where you get your public network, which is Stellar, and your private permission network, which is Hyperledger. So IBM actually was the founder of Hyperledger. Hyperledger umbrella was missing a coin capability until IBM teamed up with Stellar. So now Hyperledger settles with clears and settles with Stellar. So basically what it's doing is combining the best of both worlds, private and public networks together, a system in which you can actually have smart contracts, currency, fiat withdrawals, all on the same network, which makes it extremely efficient and which makes it extremely fast. So IBM provides the three main Stellar DLT products, which is Validator. It adds a permission construct on top of the Stellar network. Hyperledger. IBM provides their product that they've been working on for a while, since the 80s, which you'll see here shortly, which is the Universal Payment Solution. It consists of a real-time universal payment solution on top of this validation layer. So there we go again. You have the payment solution on top of the validation layer, which is the permission construct of the larger nodes, and on top of that, it exists on the public Stellar network, which is what helps govern. It's the protocol that will govern just that open system in general. And then you have your token lifecycle management product. So IBM added a token lifecycle management product, which would allow asset issuers to launch their own tokens, ICOs, CBDCs, digital commodities, etc., which will result in leveraging IBM for token engineering and lifecycle management. So here we go again, IBM placing themselves in a position where they're approaching it from a neutral perspective, saying, hey, we have this product that we're launching that we can help you launch your commodities, launch your ICOs, and we're here to help you for the full cycle of your product from end to end, whether it's the software, whether it's the actual infrastructure, the hardware. We're here to provide those services. All right, so IBM is basically placing themselves. They're taking advantage of their market, their expertise, and then bringing in the currency aspect to it, and then the smart contracts aspect to it with Hyperledger to make it basically like a universal solution that everybody can use to build their tokens on, or even settle on whatever tokens they want, because it still will be part of an open system that's technically a closed infrastructure through the IBM and Stellar network. So IBM is unique for having the capability to do all of the following: payment initiation, compliance verification, foreign exchange, and settlement. So this is a very important aspect right here that people tend to not even take into consideration. Okay, so all as real-time cascading steps for each transaction. Using IBM's Universal Payment Solution and instructions laid out in smart contracts in Hyperledger Fabric, payments are settled on the Stellar network, becoming immutable and final once recorded. So here is kind of the first step where this alone, let's say you had a token that let's say we're discussing in terms of, okay, what token is going to be at the center of this financial system. So you'll get a lot of responses, but what you got to understand is that there is a compliant aspect to all this, which is going to be governed by the information that these servers are providing to each other when you're performing a transaction at the central bank level, that can become easily traceable. So that entire compliance verification, every time that you perform a transaction, is already derived from compliance verification at the upper level before the money comes down to retail, right? So every single transaction that's come through has been verified for compliance. And the way the token works, this is the beauty of Stellar and the way it's designed. Contrary to the XRPL, on the Stellar ledger, the only token that can power transaction is Stellar Lumens, whether that's communicating about a new transaction, whether it's communicating that there's been a name change, or there's been even just information change, metadata changes. So every single time information is changed, the way the Stellar network works, or the Stellar ledger in general, is it invokes the token to be performed as a transaction no matter what. Any single type of action on the Stellar network invokes the lumens, whether it's just even to communicate between each other. It will perform a $0 transaction and then do whatever adjustments or modifications it's trying to work on. Is to establish operational corridors and to grow and operate a network of financial networks that facilitates low-cost, direct, real-time cross-currency clearing and settlement of all payment types and values. Hence, universal eventually will support other classes too, which is what Stellar is really great for. IBM's cross-border payment solution leverages Lumens as a bridge asset to facilitate real-time foreign exchange. So XLM is one of the assets on Stellar. It's also used to pay for transaction on the network. So XLM has, number one, value, and number two, true utility. So for example, let's say that a fictional island called Stellar Isle has a central bank, and that central bank wants to issue currency assets that are obligations to the central bank. In that case, Stellar is still used, and XLM is used to power those transactions for those assets, even though XLM isn't directly used as the settlement mechanism. Kind of like how Ethereum works. So does it really matter if XLM is the settlement mechanism at all times? No. I think what really matters is, one, it's the safest settlement mechanism used for two transacting parties, and number two, XLM is still used even as utility, as in this central banking example. It's the same concept as when people place XRP and on every single article that comes out regarding Ripple. So Ripple is basically like a cloud protocol. It doesn't provide, it provides a solution for enterprises or business to get into the system quickly, but it doesn't provide a really long-term solution in which you can actually build functional enterprise applications. And we'll get into that a little more shortly. But just to kind of touch on how this ties back to a real life example. So if you see here, this is, I think, a chart done by XRP Lion. So if he canceled out everything on Stellar, which, okay, you can do that if you want, but what he failed to realize is that he left Basel and he left ISO 22 right here, right? So ISO 2022 is a messaging scheme in which IBM actually provides the hardware to these companies to be able to perform functionalities and actually grow an enterprise solution while not having to worry about the maintenance and keeping up with all of the information capacity that is required to perform ISO 2022 rich data transactions. Because in reality, it's not that easy to compile this much data for every single transaction. And ISO 2022 has increased that capacity, in which a lot of companies, a lot of legacy systems are struggling to actually meet the requirements unless they're able to provide unless there's a solution that can help bridge the legacy system to the modern systems, and that's where IBM is coming in. And then you have Basel III, which is another aspect of IBM that they offer, in which they help you with that compliance, along with another important topic which we'll get into, that's called GDPR, which is the I believe it stands for General Data Regulation Protection, or protection regulation, something like that. But it has to do with how your identity is protected, or the data behind your identity is protected. And that's another very important aspect, that you can meet ISO 22, you can be Basel compliance, but do you even have a system that can meet the GDPR requirements? So then what I was mentioning earlier with IBM being involved with this payment game for a while, since at least the 80s. So I actually found this out. This was new to me. So in 1984, 1981, around there was the World Bank and the IBM actually performed they created a new financial instrument into the financial markets, which is the currency swap agreement. So basically they were able to perform globally the first currency swap solution. So when you think of pathfinding payments, for example, on the XRPL, it's the same concept. They were actually the originators of this financial instrument. So that's a very important thing to note, because you have all of these tokens that are functioning at an upper level of the stack, right? You have your protocol levels, your network level, you have your infrastructure, and then you have your internet protocols at the bottom, where everything is running along the web. So these currency pathfinding swaps is actually an idea that was already originated by IBM. So that's where this whole currency exchange ordeal is going to come into play. So not only did they invent this instrument, they also have end-to-end points with all their ATMs, you have point-of-sale terminals, and they're bringing in Stellar into all of these different aspects, right? So Stellar is at the center of every cash transaction that's happening around the world, whether you believe it or not. That's the reason that the XRPL has to use side chains, for example. It has to use payment channels, and it has to use state channels. It has to use state channels because it is a ledger account based model, in which it's basically a replicated ledger. So it doesn't track the state, it only tracks the account balances of accounts. And unlike Bitcoin, which is a UTXO, it functions at a foundation. It manages the unspent transactions, which is actually a state, right? And the state channels are important because that's how you create your smart contracts. Now, the second aspect, which is the payment channels, XRPL, for example, relies on payment channels. It can settle in XRP, but at the end of the day, it's going to have to use the payment channels because of the fact that that's not its market. Its market is working in the cloud, basically, and it's an agnostic ledger, meaning that it can use other tokens to settle on its to power the ledger, as opposed to the lumens, which is strictly prohibited to Stellar, which actually makes it a unique system because it's an open public network due to the way the algorithm is set up, but then it keeps it closed in an infrastructure sense, because if you add endpoints to it, or if you add new machinery, point of sale terminals, it's all going to tie back to Stellar because of the fact that it's working through IBM. If you look at all the Federal Register documents, anything regarding clearing, you're going to see how it's IBM involved in all of this. Here it is. So you have the clearinghouse, chips. This is CLS, which is, I believe it stands for, Okay, so here is your CLS. So IBM's working directly with CLS. If you look at the CLS website, you'll see 18 currencies, 30,000 participants through our settlement members, 6 USD trillion settled on average. But as you can see, this is IBM right at the center of everything again. So everyday banks, corporations, and investors trade currency worth trillions of dollars on the foreign exchange market in full confidence that whether they are trading British pounds or Mexican pesos or Swiss francs or Hungarian forints, they will receive the currency they paid for. One of the main reasons for that confidence is CLS, a company whose settlement service sit at the heart of the global foreign exchange ecosystem. To put these numbers in perspective, USD 13.4 trillion is approximately equivalent to the entire annual gross domestic product of China in 2018. Okay, and you're gonna start seeing how IBM is tied to all these companies because it's actually providing the services and actually hosting the platforms that these companies are running to allow for all of these other companies to build their blockchains on. It's a new market. It's called blockchain as a service. Okay, so coming back to what I like to call the mechanism. So one thing that I'm noticing is that people are completely blind and they're experiencing what we discussed earlier on the whole aspect of cognitive bias and cognitive dissonance because they're so tied into the investment that they have and what they're trying to gain that they're completely overlooking the reality of what is actually being shown to them. Let me give you guys an example. What people are failing to recognize is that the importance is actually the mechanism that is driving this mechanism right here, right? It doesn't matter if you don't have a system in which this actually provides the actual real value of gold. Like, how are you tracking that? How are you what is your bookkeeping methods for this? Like, there is a process for making sure that the actual, let's say XRP did equal gold. Okay, well, how do we know that this value is accurate and not inflated? How do we know what's being settled, how much value is actually in the system? This is the fabric that keeps it all together to allow you to experience, hey, XLM equals silver. That experience, that particular equation is created due to the fact that this equal sign exists. Without this equal sign, you have this XLM silver. What does that mean? You can't even communicate it correctly because it's just, you need the mechanism, which is your equal sign. The equal sign is what I'm after. This is the utility. Think of it like bookkeeping and accounting. How are you tracking your cash balances, right? What equals what? What is the equal sign? You know what I mean? So that's what you need to discuss. That's what I want to show people is that don't get blinded by the value. The value will come, right? But the important thing is to be, first, foundationally, you want to be in the right network, right? You want to be in the right, there's going to be a bunch of tokens, but it's only going to be one network because it makes it inefficient to have multiple networks with regards to making real-time settlements. It has to be an open network and a fair network, but there's only going to be one network, and then you'll add these tokens on here. Yeah, so I'll get into this further shortly, but it's something that they call the golden copy, in which is directly tied to DTCC. So it revolves around the Trade Information Warehouse, if you can see here, which is it's a repository of information that exists basically on IBM. And if you're not aware of the DTCC, if you've never heard of DTCC, all that really matters is this. DTCC or DTC currently provides custody and asset servicing for 3.6 million security issues from the United States and 121 other countries and territories, valued at almost 34 trillion. So let's take that value down the way we're doing. So let's continue on. So they have what they consider here it is. So 24.9 trillion electronically gold records. 9.6 trillion gold contract records. Right, so this is important because that's where this entire idea of that equal sign, the mechanism, comes into play, because you're talking about large amounts of money right here, large amounts of value, and exist over the Trade Information Warehouse, which is tied. It's literally an IBM product. and I'm going to show you that here shortly. Okay, so Genesis block, I'll dive into this one a little more as it's super important. So generating a first new block on the first blockchain base ledger that identifies the first client and the first collateral associated with the first token. So a good way to think about this is it creates the audit trail and allows for a little more control in an open system. So let's think about it like this. Let's say this was a financial network. Every single big circle you see, just picture in this case that being a node or a new network that's being a new blockchain that's being tied into the existing infrastructure, right? But what the Genesis block does is picture all these big ones right here being a Genesis block, the start of a new network that's tying into the existing network. This is where the collateral is associated. It's the first token in the system, and this is the individual or the node or entity that has created these other associated transactions. You see that? So if you control these Genesis blocks, you control the network. Okay, but so in other words, whenever you have some kind of fraudulent activity take place, all you gotta do is cut this off right here. This little line, you just gotta cut it. You gotta cut that main line right there off to the center. Now you can at least create a trail of, okay, this is the node where the fraudulency took place, and then from here, essentially everything else should be tied to that block as it's creating a new transaction. So it's all tied back to the Genesis block. So think of the Genesis block as an anchor. This is an anchor to the system. This is an anchor to the new network, which is the token and the collateral associated with this entire new system. Right, so that's just a good way to think about the Genesis block. But yeah, it's important because it creates that audit trail. That's what blockchain is really used for, to create that transaction history. If you can see here, so there's two important things that happen when underneath the hood every time you have a transaction from the blockchain node level. So transactions go through, they need to have access to the world state database, and you also have your Genesis block, which basically helps trace back the cash trail and determines fraudulency or not. This is what is used for anti-money laundering regulations. Okay, so that's just a very important aspect to keep in mind, the entire idea of the Genesis block, and that's where things get interesting. So if you see here, changes to token ownership are automatically recorded on the respective custodian ledger, and exchanges are transferred to the trading entity so that the ledger can be updated with the actual currency and moved from the custodian to the trading entity account. Right, so Genesis blocks on each blockchain-based ledger are signed by the exchange network, which provides initial trust and acts as a barricade against rogue nodes that prevent them from entering the network. Okay, so on to the next portion. So I'm done with the first section. So starting at the top of this PDF, the latest chapter in IBM's quest to build a cloud for banks. So as previously discussed, IBM is building tools for infrastructure and core banking systems for these banks to have an easier transition into this new regulated financial market. One of the most important aspects of the financial system that's coming is the idea of having stricter regulations, especially when it comes to anti-money laundering policies, along with other just stringent cyber security requirements that are going to be required of businesses or enterprises that are acting or conducting as a business within the new financial network. So first things first, I kind of did some highlights to run through this one briefly. So IBM's Financial Services Ready Cloud. So here it mentions BNP Paribas announced it would be the first anchor customer in Europe. Now, the problem with the regulations that are coming is not only a big data issue as discussed previously, it's actually also a very complex situation because of the fact that there's so many different regulations for many different districts, along with regulatory changes that are consistently changing. They're like ever evolving. especially as technology evolves. They almost work almost like in tandem, as one piece of it increases. For example, if technology becomes much more efficient, there's new ways that hackers are providing cybersecurity risks. So of course you have to increase the regulatory challenges and also the compliance requirements that are needed to be met. The IBM Cloud for Financial Services platform addresses cybersecurity, compliance, and inherent risk in the public cloud. So an easy way to think about this, right? And here it kind of talks about a little more. So ecosystem for all financial businesses to serve its IT needs. So at the foundation of clearing and settlement, what that actually is and what that entails is information and messages getting passed around and confirmed and verified and kept on an immutable ledger. So what people don't understand is that certain network IT architectures drive certain business processes and enterprises. For example, certain types of project management practices or certain types of leadership styles have been derived from computer systems and network IT infrastructures that were developed, in the 80s. These are ideas that at one point had a direction, but things have completely changed now. And these not only have they changed, they've changed so fast that these legacy systems have not been able to keep up. So this is a market, right? Bringing in legacy systems into the game. Okay, so here it talks about overseen by a set of global financial institutions and promontory financial group. I have a Twitter post here that I'll show you guys in a bit. Another one that's deceptive, but it's actually talking about IBM. So IBM Watson, machine learning, all of this is going to provide the tools for a company to be able to partner with IBM products in order to conform to the regulations and verify and confirm that your framework is compliant, so that you can function, so you can have a functioning business that you can scale and do more with your business without having to worry about the implications of regulations, because that in and of itself is a very tiring task on the IT team, right? It's just so much work to constantly keep up with the compliance and regulation aspect, especially when it's changing. The whole reason this is important is because XLM is still used even as utility in this central banking example. So again, this ties back to the whole concept that just because the actual article that you're referring to right now is referencing Ripple, for example, at the heart of it, due to the fact that the ledger can only be powered by the native currency of Lumens, which is partnered with IBM and its blockchain. So IBM, it's using the DLT, which is Stellar, and Stellar's ledger technology is at the heart of this. Every single time that Watson perform some sort of compliance transaction for verification or regulation or some kind of any sort of communication, has to invoke a token. Even if it's a zero transaction, it has to record it to create that blockchain of data, and to also put that in the database. So every single time that gets used, Lumens gets used. To give you guys a better idea what this previous section is portraying, consider this scenario. Okay, so basically IBM, what it's doing is it creating an entire new market out of a need for enterprises, right? So a way to think about this is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with how retail works. For example, in particular, I'm referring to like online retail. I did online retail as a business previously for an Amazon business, and what I did not know was that for a lot of the shirts or caps or a lot of basic items, sunglasses, anywhere from like products of like pretty much anything. Like everything out there is a base product. So there's companies out there that manufacture these base products like caps, for example. And then you come and you put your logo on it, you put your branding, and you push it for a markup, right? That's retail. Like for some reason I always thought that retail, actually I never really thought about it like that, but that's how it works. But for some reason I had an idea that, or I always kind of figured that maybe retail is like designing your own cap or your own style of cap, your own materials. But that's not the way it works. You partner with these manufacturers, and these manufacturers, there's a certain amount of manufacturers that manufacture this product, and everybody uses them, rebrands them, and creates their own business on top of it. So same concept here, except there are limited to no competitors in this market. Yeah, because it's so brand new and it's just so involved. You really do have to be in this game for a long time to be at the level that IBM is, because of the fact that they have distributed hardware all around the world. So it's a very big feat that they've accomplished. But to go back to that example, what they're doing is that they're branding themselves as, hey, come grow your business on us, right? We take care of the compliance, we take care of all the hardware, we take care of the public cloud system. So on our end, that's what we do, and that's what we specialize. Similar to the way the way you would manufacture a product that people can rebrand. You can rebrand our products. You partner with us, and we move forward, and we provide that neutral platform. So that's the same thing that IBM is doing from a market perspective, except on a completely unimaginable scale. Supply chain, compliance, quantum computing, semiconductors, core banking systems, servers, mainframes, ATMs, point of sale terminals, universal product barcodes, and clearinghouses, settlement, hybrid CBDC models, end-to-end solutions, derivatives. It's all over the place, and I'm going to continue going through this until it becomes clear as day that we have a winner here, and it's Stellar with IBM. Back and review ISO 2022 for a quick second. As mentioned, ISO 2022 is literally just an API messaging standard in which international organizations have decided to structure their data when it comes to performing transactions internationally. Instead of there being all these different types of requirements from all these different payment systems, they decided to come up with a unified system in which it allows for people to build a more efficient and structured payment system overall on a global scale. There is a very key aspect to this that people have completely overlooked. So if you read through some of the ISO 2022 documents, I actually have here the original publication from 2004, when this ISO standard itself came to be. So this part right here, it is key to understanding what I'm trying to say here. For payment systems to leverage ISO 2022, the architecture must support ISO 2022 data to those components that can leverage the expanded data set, including fraud systems, sanctions screening, regulatory reporting, and payments archive. Now, the reason this is so important is because, as I was mentioning with IBM, when it comes to their market of introducing infrastructure that's designed to do a lot of these tasks already, IBM is focusing on the architecture of their systems along with their hardware, and creating a payment network with Stellar that already takes all of these factors into account. Because in reality, what this is really doing at the end of the day is it's making it more and more difficult when it comes to collecting data. The amount of capacity that you're needing now with your servers and your computer systems just makes it much more complicated, especially when you're throwing in things like Internet of Things and just basically bringing all this data into a database and making it the payment network. So just simply looking into IBM Watson, for example, IBM Watson takes on compliance. So IBM is focusing on all these aspects of utility around maintaining a well-functioning payment network system that the utility is getting overlooked. And if you want a further example, this is also what IBM's Financial Transaction Manager does. So as you start to peel back this information, you start to realize that all these companies, for example, Swift, they're all needing to utilize IBM because IBM is focusing on that portion of this actual system and this transition into the new system. And as discussed earlier, just to give you guys another reminder, every single time that there is a transaction that regards Stellar Network, whether the token is being used directly or not, it's still being utilized because it's the native token that powers that network. So it invokes a transaction every single time. The universal messaging backbone. And if you think back to the other section, the universal financial industry messaging scheme is what ISO 2022 declared itself as. And now we have IBM MQ as the universal messaging backbone. So immediately that should tell you that this statement is already being supported by a system or offer or a type of suite or platform that IBM offers already. So payment systems to leverage ISO 2022, the architecture must support. That's exactly what the universal messaging backbone indicates. So this made it clear as day to me that there's a connection between ISO 2022 and IBM. And then as I continued to learn more about IBM Q, it happens to be the most widely adopted messaging backbone with 10,000 customers using IBM's messaging backbone. So I need to pull this one up separately because there's a lot of information here, and I think it's worth taking somewhat of a deeper dive than some of the other sheets. Not too deep because I don't want this video to be way too long. It's already hard to keep up with as it is, but just to give you guys some diagrams. So IBM WebSphere MQ provides the universal messaging backbone for service-oriented architecture connectivity. So do you recall the second time that I went over this statement? Here it is again. So for payment systems to leverage ISO 2022, the architecture must support ISO 2022 data. So here it is again with some images. The universal messaging backbone, do you see that right here? Universal messaging backbone, you got managed file transfer. I guess we can consider this telecom, advanced message security, enterprise messaging, mobile, right? So you got mobile and smarter planet solutions, big data, social analytics, all ties back to this right here as well. Payments archive requires database and just big data analytics. Same with, and then you have things like sanction screening, regulatory reporting, all ties back to having an advanced message security system. You got telecom. So the actual architecture of what IBM has been building supports directly what ISO 22 requires. And that's important because That's how I'm going to show you guys that IBM is not show you. That's how I'm going to prove to you guys that IBM is actually working with the Federal Reserve. It becomes clear as day. Like, there's no denying it. There's no denying it when I show you. Yeah, okay, that's where we were. Let's continue where we were. So the IBM MQ. This is a great document. Now check out these fun facts right here. So IBM WebSphere has the following credentials and industry recognition. It is the most widely deployed messaging backbone with over 10,000 customers. Over 90% of Fortune 50 companies and Fortune 10 companies use the IBM messaging backbone. Over 80% of Global 25 companies and 70% of Global 10 companies use the IBM messaging backbone. It is entrusted with tens of billions of messages each day. A government client sends, for example, 675 million messages per day. A banking client handles over 213 million messages per day on IBM ZOS alone. It is also relied upon as the mission critical backbone. And for those that aren't aware on what that is, mission critical data is just data that cannot be interrupted, such as anything involving, like, for example, a hospital. If someone's on life support, you don't want interrupted data when it comes to that, or interrupted power, same concept but with data. A financial markets client handles US 1 trillion worth of traffic per day on the WebSphere MQ network. A banking client sends 7 to 35 trillion worth of traffic per day on just one WebSphere MQ based Swift gateway. 22, right? ISO 2022 has a certain type of component to it that only these types of products will allow you to achieve. So that's ISO 2022. So it's the same concept with the FedNow system that you'll see shortly. So let's continue on this paper a little more. Okay. Here it talks about how it connects devices and physical devices, almost like with the Internet of Things. Enterprise messaging. So here's some more just details for anybody who wants to dive into that more. Solution architecture. Let me see if this is important. So queue manager cluster allows multiple instances of the same service to be hosted through multiple queue managers. In a way, this is how this is kind of related to how IBM and Stellar are building their payment network. Stellar has somewhat something like this built in their Stellar consensus protocol. So you got some scenarios here that it goes through. Here it talks about faster bank payments. So it talks about how the IBM WebSphere can provide a way of efficiently managing that data a little better, and can even offer faster bank payments. So where have we heard of that? ISO 2022, same concept, just not directly saying it. Okay. So IBM WebSphere is at the core of the solution architecture. I think it was or service-oriented architecture, message backbone, and any-to-any connectivity is its core value. So IBM has been working on this for a long time. Messaging gateway, Internet of Things, IBM Watson. Here's another diagram. This is a diagram of the IBM Watson platform. I think this is their cognitive platform. It says right here, message gateway connects large numbers of clients and routes large volumes of messages. IBM Watson Internet of Things platform supports publish, subscribe, and point-to-point messaging. It is a subject-based publish, subscribe broker, not a content-based broker. Unlike a content-based broker, message content is not queried or altered by the IBM Watson IoT platform. Typically sits alongside other edge of network devices with the same objectives, forwarding large volumes of internet traffic from many different clients. So just offers a good picture on how IBM works on the background, tying all these types of devices together, mainly because they're built in and they're embedded software in a lot of these types of devices. So that's what gives them the capability to provide such an efficient system in this manner. So that shows the difficulty of being able to overcome such a integrated system that IBM is building there. It's a monster. Here is more on the IBM WebSphere. Let me see if this is even worth reviewing. It is, and so here it is, some more just info. So support for the superior single European payments area, SEPA payments. So for those that don't believe in IBM and their blockchain and Stellar, here's more just info on how it offers these packs of software for you to come in and be able to launch your a business or an enterprise system and not have to worry about all these types of different types of language and messaging unification schemes that you have to do on the background. Here goes into like the hardware requirements. This is IBM's Z system, which is a cool looking server that I'll show you guys shortly. So there's that. What does it do? It's an WebSphere application server, helps you build, deploy, and run applications with flexible, security-rich Java EE certified runtime environments, from lightweight production environments to large enterprise deployments. So I don't really know what most of that means. The only thing I pick up here is security-rich, which ties into it's a type of format of data, of text, and how it's presented. And I know that ISO 2022 provides some sort of rich data, which is a lot of where the capacity increase in storage comes from overall. Let's see, DTCC. So I'll go into this here shortly because this is another very important topic that might be out of line here. Let's see. DTCC, where are we at? IBM WebSphere. So DTCC, so for those that don't know what this is the Depository Trust. Here it is. The Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation provides custody and asset servicing for more than 2.5 million securities issued from the United States. So here's that security rich again. Security rich WebSphere, IBM WebSphere. What does it do? Allow you to deploy security rich runtime environments, and then here it is stated directly on the DTCC paper, and then here it even talks about just IBM in general, just literally directly tied to it. So I don't even have to go into that much detail to show you guys. You know, when I'm reading through these, I read them, but I look for things to pick out, right? Anomalies that I spot just looking at this information over and over and over again. And here it even talks about the company employs approximately 450 application developers to create products for its customers, who include brokers, dealers, institutional investors, banks, trust companies, mutual fund companies, insurance carriers, hedge funds, and other financial intermediaries. And for those that aren't aware of the revenue or the amount of, I guess you can say, cash value cash transactions that passes through the DCCC, here's an idea to create security-rich applications capable of handling the clearance and settlement of more than 1 quadrillion in security transactions per year. So monster amounts of money. So beyond just this document, so here is Hyperledger, deployed Hyperledger governance with Axon EDLT was important to DTCC, wants it to push for the common standard in the credit derivatives market. So there you go, derivatives. It's not just retail for Stellar. It's derivatives, securities, the whole thing. Internet of Things, even repo markets. So here's some more info on repo markets. And a quick fact, so the largest processor of financial transactions, so this relates to DTCC, handles about 120 million to 150 million transactions per day. Here's DTCC picks the IBM to manage telecom spend. So here you go, more direct information of DTCC being involved with IBM for quite a long time now. Just on all fronts. It's insane to see how much IBM has integrated themselves into this new system that's coming. Here's just another software that they have, that they offer. Let's see what we got here. And here's just another not interesting, but this is what kind of drives a lot of these videos that I make. I see people posting, I would consider it misinformation, because there's obviously something that's there's a layer of it that needs to be uncovered. But for example, a lot of these accounts just, I don't know, maybe they're AI, but they all just point everything towards XRP and Ripple as if everything is tied to it. Everything's tied to Ripple. Sorry, I'll take that back. A lot of things are tied to Ripple, but they're not necessarily referring to XRP, the token. It does not mean that they utilize XRP. It means that they utilize the Ripple protocol as an interbank cloud payment protocol for interbank transfers. These posts are deceptive because so for example, here's DTCC, talks about legacy systems. Swift and DTCC both replacing legacy systems with a single platform to manage all corporate actions. So as we've just been reviewing, ISO 2022, Swift, DTCC, all completely directly, without a doubt, tied to IBM. This is 100% not referring to XRP. So I just, it's just crazy to see people blinded by cognitive bias or cognitive just misalignment, man, with not doing the due diligence of diving deeper into the information. So here it is, just some more info on some banks involved with all of this. So DTCC, this is with the Hyperledger project, I believe. Look who's involved: Barclays, Credit Suisse, JP Morgan, UBS, IHS Market. Like, this is massive. This was another interesting thing that I saw. So this is the Trade Information Warehouse, which is a database that exists on IBM. Here's another value we can throw in there: 1.48 quadrillion securities transaction. That was in 2009. Imagine the value now. This was where it really caught my eye. So the warehouse maintains the most current CDS contract details on the official legal or gold record for both cleared and bilaterally executed CDS transactions. The repository also stores key information on market participants, single-sided, non-legally binding, or copper records for CDS transactions to help regulators and market participants gain a clearer and more complete snapshot of the market's overall risk exposure to OTC credit derivatives instruments. So here, a gold record represents the current legal state of the contract. In fact, each user of the warehouse's services has signed a binding agreement that states that, notwithstanding any provisions in any other applicable documentation relating to such transaction, the contract maintained by the warehouse represent the definitive record of each transaction and supersede any other documentation or understanding, whether written, oral, or electronic, between the parties. The warehouse documents are relied upon to resolve any dispute between counterparties and to determine any payments or settlements by the warehouse. So here is another big data problem that IBM is completely just involved up and down with these all these systems, with the Federal Reserve, with DTCC, and I'll show you guys some more proof here shortly of the Trade Information Warehouse being tied, literally just being directly IBM Cloud, RippleNet, etc. So IBM Cloud offers Ripple and Swift connectivity via Swiss route RippleNet TM adapter. So all that matters from this is, so this is an example of when people constantly tie RippleNet, Ripple back to XRP, when that is 100% not the case. So let me show you right here. So here you go, for example. So RippleNet ties into this right here, this connector, which is Finastra Fusion Total Messaging. So if you go here, so the RippleNet works with ties into the Finastra shown here. Finastra works with a product called Swiss route, and it's basically Swiss route is what's allowing you to tie into RippleNet and Swift. So it's doing the tying in for you, all in one product, and you're gonna see how that's IBM. So if you go to IBIS, here you go. So now with our IBM Cloud Services, you can securely acquire IBM I processing and storage capacity in the private cloud on demand. We tailor your IBM environment. Here you go. And then it says right here, with the Swiss route RippleNet TM adapter, processing transactions through RippleNet will be easier. With the practicality of having both Swift and Ripple in your pocket, there are no more limitations to your banking possibilities. So look at that. So it's literally telling you that this tool that IBM has allows you to connect those two. In other words, make them interoperable. So where's the true utility? That's the true utility. What is creating the integration? And if you keep this in mind real quick right here, so having both Swift and Ripple in your pocket. So when I go back, let me pull it up. When I go back to, let's see if I find it. So pat in, remote transaction. No. Let's see, here it is. So let's go back to this document, the Stellar Bank International Agent or Transaction Agent. So here, okay, perfect. So let me pull this up. So here, architecture and main solution of a computer software system. This is the Stellar Bank's external transaction agent for internal remittance on Stellar Network. But the part that I wanted to show was right here. So it talks about right here. So existing systems for banks remittance do not correspond to contemporary volume, speed, and real-time requirements. Existing blockchain-based system Ripple uses two different networks and does not. So here in this section, I basically wanted to point out this paragraph where it discusses Ripple and Swift, basically stating that the efficiency of Ripple would need to be applied together with Swift, while the Stellar network would all be functioning on one network. So this just supports the idea of this previous section where it discusses the Swiss route adapter. Basically, just because you're seeing Ripple behind the scenes, IBM is 100% involved with what's going on. Banks and businesses have embarked on a modernization journey. So a core banking modernization with Red Hat OpenShift So for those that don't know or aren't aware of what this is, so here we go again into some more info on the modernization strategy for banks and businesses. This article was directly found on the IBM website. Looks like it talks about Swift and working with Swift to just create that transition, as I've been discussing, to adopting a new type of payment network with new capabilities, while keeping the same almost like legacy feel to it all. So just kind of looking through this PDF: improve risk management and security, reduce downtime, and operational efficiency. So banks and businesses have worldwide have embarked on a modernization journey, trying to reimagine their systems and get ready for the world tomorrow. So while each institution faces different challenges, all are seeking common goals: new and improved channel experiences. So this is the number one goal that they're all trying to. Hey babe. Did you see that? So here we go. So while each institution faces different challenges, all are common goals: new and improved. All are seeking common goals: new and improved channel experiences, integrated technologies, cost management, cost takeout, improve risk management, security, reduce downtime, and operational efficiency. So these are all goals that are aimed to set the foundation for growth and agility, and ultimately a better client experience. To support this journey, most banks and businesses have announced a cloud. Their transformation strategies is inextricably linked to moving to a cloud model for the flexibility, agility, resilience, and time to market acceleration that it offers. As the race to cloud adoption continues, now is the time to stop and evaluate the many options available to achieve your goals. Can you securely interoperate with ecosystem partners and networks? Can you automate to mitigate compliance risk? Are your systems designed with zero trust in mind? And are your in-house resources optimized for high value work, or burdened increasing by operational demands? So cloud has become mainstream. Now, continuing on with this next sentence: with its proven benefits, executives in every industry are investing and demanding that their physical infrastructure is moving to the cloud, or that is moved to the cloud, pressuring their teams to deliver mass migration to cloud while losing sight of their real objectives. Increasingly, we see businesses lift and shift their systems, recreating the same issues in a new environment and gaining nothing but the bragging rights of a cloud infrastructure. So this is something that's very common right now in the enterprise world. So this is, I actually work for a very large enterprise, and this is exactly what I've seen. What companies are doing is that they're adding all these modular, or they think are modular, applications to existing enterprise systems, thinking that they're going to solve or patch up an issue that they have ongoing with their maybe their project management practices. But the reality is, all they're doing is taking all of their problems that they derived from when before they had the cloud, and now they're doing the same patterns, same habits on the cloud, but they have the bragging rights, as mentioned here, of being on the cloud infrastructure. So what IBM is focusing on is that, so if you see here, the reality of a Swift infrastructure is that it requires a physical footprint to host hardware components. So this is another key aspect as to why RippleNet isn't as utility driven as IBM and Stellar, because IBM and Stellar have the hardware component to it. When you're an enterprise and you're wanting to really develop products to the market and bring them fast, and you want security, you want to be, you want to be performing. You want all your workers to be performing at their best in an environment that allows them to thrive and be more productive in general. that's what IBM is coming in to fix, right? So it's saying here, this sure smells like this sure smells like a rebuild your Swift connectivity as is on public cloud. So what do you gain? Right, so it's talking about how you don't really gain anything just moving over to the cloud. That isn't the solution. A lot of companies think that's the solution, but it's not. You still have to build and configure your infrastructure. You're still responsible to maintain the infrastructure and apply upgrades. You still have a physical footprint to manage. You still have to build or retain the skills and resources to support a Swift infrastructure and the responsibility to comply with mandatory controls. This is not cheaper, better, or faster, right? So look what that's saying. Look at that saying. This is not cheaper, better, or faster. Instead, consider shifting from a build and maintain model to a subscribe and accelerate model that integrates a value-added Swift certified service bureau and a purpose-built cloud for financial services. So it says right here, you can connect to a worldwide network of fully redundant Swift gateways. Finding the right partner who can manage your Swift infrastructure will allow you to leverage a pool of specialized resources available on demand. Finally, complying with Swift customer security programs control is mandatory, and Swift multiple architecture models provide you options and flexibility to minimize the number and complexity of in-scope components. So this is being marketed to like an IT team, for example. This is what sells, right? This is what's behind all the deception and delusions of potentially like riddles. What people aren't realizing that this all takes work to maintain, and it takes resources, and it takes a lot of back-end work to make this all function, one, correctly, and then two, to be functioning over time as things are adapting and changing. So here's just a couple points. Cloud adoption is a tool to achieve your goals. It should never be the goal. I know companies get caught up in that, so they're marketing themselves as, hey, you don't have to worry about that. We got our existing virtual private networks and our systems. And this is how we can help your company get there faster. Okay. Ripple Network, Swift Network, IBM Redbooks Network, Knoxwire. So it's all about the network. It's all about the amount of networks. It drives the amount of nodes. It drives the amount of decentralization. More nodes is usually better depending on the protocol. So if you implement the right protocol, more is better. So a quick look at partnerships and their importance. If you guys do some digging on Swift and why it's important, it's because it's already established with 11,000 banks and financial institutions. So all of these financial institutions and banks are already using Swift. But in comes Redbooks. Redbooks actually has 16,000 banks and financial institutions utilizing IBM's core banking software solutions, right? And then RippleNet, just kind of dive into a little more on how it utilizes middleware. So instant to be as efficient as it needs to be, it requires or relies on middleware. Instead of accessing the core banking systems of financial institutions, your middleware will integrate with RippleNet using API operations that replicate funding into the RippleNet virtual accounts. That tells you basically that the Ripple protocol is a replicated state database ledger solution, almost, where it's basically just tracking accounts and their balances via cloud in this case. So the reliability isn't as strong or as it would be in a system with IBM, where you're actually providing the hardware and the storage capacity. As like an example would be the Z16 that I'll show shortly. It's a server that you buy to deploy your new network architecture and new IT system. And then we get into things like Knox wire that I won't touch on much in this video, but as you can see, they have even more connections at about 30,000 in 200 countries with 150 currencies. Okay, let's see if I want to dive into that one yet. Lumen Technologies, next section, Lumen Technologies, VPN, quantum fiber. This is another aspect that gets overlooked, which is the whole idea of a secure virtual private network. This so happens to be a company called Lumen Technologies, who's been working with the Army and the military, creating these virtual private networks. And it seems to have been bought, or it came from a company they used to be called CenturyLink. And the importance of this is the amount of the amount of fiber optic cabling that they're shooting as their goal to be in the years to come. So it looks here, they want to invest to expand U.S. intercity network by 6 million fiber miles. The reason this is important is because fiber optics drive the speed of quantum computing across a lot of across high density urban areas where enterprises would utilize this type of solution. It helps with transporting that information through those types of environments, so that you can actually have a functioning quantum communication with your servers. So that's just one aspect to it. Fiber optic cables provide a lot of technology capabilities. So that's how this ties into IBM. If you go here, I included some websites. So they've been working directly with Lumen Technologies. Where is it? Here it is. With just working on their satellite technologies, their cloud solutions. So there's just some more scalability to what IBM is offering. Here I included a picture showing some military operations and how they would function essentially, and here it shows fiber optic networks, how they would be part of an entire global information infrastructure. Next we have Twitter posts. I'm gonna save this Elon Musk reference. I'm back and forth whether I wanted to keep this one in here or not. I might as well. I might not keep it. I might keep it. We'll see. But I thought it was interesting that Elon Musk kind of made a reference to these companies as if to indicate some kind of tie to Satoshi Nakamoto. I know Samsung's working on semiconductor products. Toshiba is involved in like point of sale terminals, and they got a lot of patents as far as like international patents. I don't know much about Nakamichi, and then Motorola just involved in telecom business. Here you have a further breakdown. So Samsung and IBM teaming up for semiconductor products. Here's some more on Lumen's Technologies, created a distributed cloud using IBM satellite. So that's what's important in this aspect, the distributed cloud, because we are dealing with a big data problem, not a money issue. It's a data issue. Here's more info on those fiber optic cablings. They want to span across I don't know how many countries. This is what they're thinking for their backbone. Actually, this is I think this may be what they already have, or it might be what they're planning for actually. So let's leave it at that. Toshiba Global Commerce Solutions, they're retying to merchants for more end-to-end point access. Then you got ties with Apple and IBM, focusing on building mobile devices with more enterprise focused needs. So those are just some big partnerships right off the bat that sort of tie to this Elon Musk reference. Just thought that it was a little interesting and wanted to share that as well. So another big partnership that I've been seeing people post on Twitter and think it's Ripple or So another big partnership that people overlook is the IBM FIS WorldPay. So Fidelity National Information Services. For those of you that don't know what that is, Fidelity Information Services. So here's WorldPay. WorldPay, you recognize it by point of sale terminals. You'll see the little logo. That's a product of FIS. FIS and WorldPay are basically tied together, right? Is a product of FIS. Here's a picture of them partner with FIS. This is directly from their website. This is directly from FIS's website. 4 trillion was processed on our asset management technology in 2022. So let's take that down as a note. So let's take that down. So let's take that down in our notes for, remember, I'm not even catching all of them. Look at this. It's a crazy amount of money. And the reason I brought that up is because they are directly tied to IBM. So IBM is tied directly to FIS. Here's the proof. IBM, common set of values and objectives form the foundation of a 20-year partnership. So right away, 100% talking about IBM. So you can assume Stellar in this situation also. Here is just some more technical info on IBM and their Z system, which really specializes in this deep learning portion is what I'm noticing. So according to IBM, the throughput and improvements of running AI models on the mainframe are sufficient to support real-time fraud analysis of virtually all transactions in even high volume bank card or payments processing environments. So think about this. Think about you own a company, or think about this. All these articles that have Ripple mentioning in them, where people always assume it's XRP. Think about it this way. So think about this. You're a company and you have IBM blockchain and other blockchains. IBM blockchain offers you the capability to have every single one of your transactions, even high volume bank card and payments processing environment, can all be checked thoroughly for fraud analysis. Like that alone is what is generally keeping IBM at the middle of this. IBM is setting themselves up for a monster future. Okay, next one. Let's keep moving. Okay. Next category, IBM Power SC AIX. So this ties back to the whole GDPR thing. More on so here's Power. So for those that see, so here's the next category, IBM Power SC AIX GDPR. IBM Power SC, I believe that's a power server, so it's like having your own server, but look what it does. It offers the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, HIPAA, and GDPR. So HIPAA, another one, just regarding privacy protection of data. Very rare that you're going to find companies working on these protocols to be able to control these in-house. Here's some on the integration bus for IBM. IBM integration bus. So you can find some good information looking up this this topic, IBM integration bus introduction. Just search that on your search that on Google. It'll pull up even a bunch of cool diagrams that you can basically red pill yourself. So let's see if I can pull some of them up. Yeah, here it is. So this just exposes it all. So on the back end, there's a lot going on in the back end, and when you start digging into these topics, that's exactly where you're going. So it's going to pull up a lot of these cool diagrams that make it pretty easy to I wouldn't necessarily say pretty easy to understand, but it helps to get a visual of how these things are coming together. Sometimes, a lot of this technical talk can be sometimes hard to picture in your head. But here's an example of how the IBM integration bus works. Takes all this cloud information, does what it needs to do with the data, sorts it, and then puts it on databases, ties it into all these different types of platforms and just data reroute, data entry points. So as you can see, the reason it took me a long time to get this video out is because there's just so much information. I'm gonna have to just start going through the important points. It's just getting way too long. So IBM strategy full stack here just discusses IBM speeds real-time payment processing, unleashes additional support for high volume international payments via the SWIFT network. So again, SWIFT tapping into IBM. Here is a little more on the universal blockchain payment solution. There's that word universal again, universal rail for real-time clearing and settlement on an integrated blockchain network. Here we start getting into the role of the Stellar Payment Network, which again will be emphasized to emphasize the Stellar Payment Network is achievable due to the Stellar Consensus Protocol and the way it's designed to be open yet somewhat closed with an infrastructure as the infrastructure layer. Due to the Stellar Consensus Protocol, which helps in. So here it talks about the universal rail for real-time clearing and settlement on an integrated network. Just starts diving into IBM, and this is where the whole Stellar network comes into play. Having an on-chain, efficient. Currency and cash exchange network, currency and cash exchange platform, all on one chain, making it very efficient, more reliable, and even increases fraud protection and overall just productivity wise, and overall just the standard is raised when you have one of these systems. The sole purpose of IBM is to focus on reducing infrastructure costs and compliance risks. So you can dive into that some more here. What is XRP? XRP is created to serve as a settlement layer, facilitating the transactions with the Ripple network. So the thing with XRP is that since IBM is already integrating into these core banking platforms. Since IBM is already integrated into these core banking platforms, it's easy for them to incentivize the banks to use Lumens because they offer cheaper, faster payments because they are the payment system. XRP, you can settle with XRP, but what it's having to do is it's having to rely on the payment channel for currency exchanges, and even then there's the whole compliance aspect to it, where regardless due to the compliance, then there's the whole compliance aspect to it, where regardless if you're selling with XRP or another token, you still invoke Lumen. So while it would just make more sense to go ahead and use the same token that's on that existing payment network that's already implementing itself to run the regulations on your transactions. Okay, so here's some more topics you can look up. So as you can see, just continually, here are some more topics for you guys. It's so many topics that IBM covers. It's insane. Here, dive into derivatives. Just clearly more connections. This is as I'm going through this, I was trying to put together a document that you guys can look through to tie everything back to IBM with without a doubt. So here, for example, LCH, if you look that up, that's the London Clearinghouse. LCH is the London Clearinghouse. LCH, which is the London Clearinghouse. So here we go, tied directly to commodities, tied directly to the OTC market, and everything is on here. Everything is written. Everything is in articles. Everything is backed by documentation. Swap dealers back LCH bilateral derivatives platform. So that is 100% talking about IBM. Swap dealers, there it is, the whole idea of currency swaps again. This new service is backed by 11 dealers, including Bank of America, Barclays, HSBC. These are all using IBM. People think that every time they hear Ripple, it means XRP, but they're using Ripple for the interbank transfers, but invoking lumens for every single transaction, no matter what. So you can dive into that on just on your own. I even included this chart right here for you guys to visualize a little better. I even included this chart right here for you guys to be able to visualize the information a little better. Here I went through and I actually tied in CME group to FX Link. FX Link integrates into CME with Refinitiv and IHS Market. I included articles for you guys to have as well so that you can review this information for yourself. Here it talks about how it links to MarketServe for straight through processing of payments. Now if I go back to MarketServe right here, ties back to LCH and Ostra, which ties back to the CME group, essentially. All that to say that the Stellar Ledger, the IBM blockchain, is being used to create this platform for foreign exchange derivatives. TradeServe, here we go, for more proof. So here's more proof. So IHS Market transforms derivative post-trade processing with new cloud-based platform. Talking about IBM, this ties everything back to that trade information warehouse that I mentioned in one of the earlier sections. Ties it back to the DTCC. Let me pull up my notes for. So if you recall, 34 trillion for DTCC, settled 1.48 quadrillion in securities. So that's for you guys to have. That'll be a nice chart that you guys can have. And these are the topics that led me to find the whole World Bank IBM currency swap item. Let's see. So here's some more just connections. Refinitiv. Refinitiv ties to LSEG through this global relay plugin. What is the global relays IBM Domino plugin, and what versions? Let's see what this is about. Right, so LSEG acquires Refinitiv. What is LSEG? What is this even? So what does it stand for? This stands for the London Exchange. So this stands for the London Stock Exchange Group, which is a leading provider of financial markets infrastructure and global supplier of data and analytics, news, and index products. Here we go again, just more connections that are tied. So here's LSEG. It acquired Refinitiv, and After acquiring Affinitive, and LSEG, the London Stock Exchange Group, tied back to the LCH. Let me see, I forgot how they're tied together. So this ties all back to the London Stock Exchange Group. Here it talks about this FX link. So this FX link is where everything links up to LSEG. So as you can see, just more connections. So there you go. There's a chart for you guys to review on your own. Just crazy article on derivatives to give you guys a perspective. 867 trillion markets open to blockchain. Digital Money Report Institute, nothing there. Keep moving. US Digital Dollar Project. So I was finally able to tie this one back to IBM as well. Here's a PDF for you guys to have. Key highlights from PDF. Tokenization. This is 100% not referring to XRP Ripple because that tech is an account-based model and not a UTXO. A UTXO model you guys can review on your own, but basically what it is like the idea of change. It tracks the unspent transaction, so that essentially is a state. So there comes that's where your state channels can sometimes come into play. And here in this case, XRP, the whole XRPL is based on an account-based accounting type model, which is a replicated state, which are basically like virtual bank accounts where you're tracking balances, ledger balances, which in this case can be a positive or a negative. Typically, account-based models are easier to add logic for smart contracts. However, in this case, when it comes to digital assets, you need to access payment. You need to know. You also need to have the state recognized of a transaction, along with having access to cash and currency exchange, because cash is the final byproduct of because cash is the final commitment transaction recorded on a ledger or an account, for example. Because cash is the final last mile to any type of payment. So this is the paper from I believe ACI, but it mentions tokenization. Okay, how did I tie this one in there? So here's the digital dollar project for you guys to review on your own as well. I was able to tie into that one directly. So the big one, FedNow, IBM, MQ, RTN. So this is where alright, so this is so you can put everybody to rest. Alright, so this is so you can shut everybody up. Okay, so this is right here. This is the most important document in this entire video. Everything highlighted in green. So sending and receiving messages including ISO 2022. This will occur using an application interfacing with an IBM MQ client, which connecting parties will need to install. So now let's go back to what we've been learning and what we've been reading. Okay, so we got ISO 2022. So if you recall, the whole idea with ISO. So if you recall, the whole idea with ISO So if you recall, the whole idea So if you recall, the whole idea behind ISO 2022 is that this statement here, for any payment system trying to leverage ISO 2022, the architecture must support the rich type data, must support ISO 2022 data to those components that can leverage the expanded data set, including fraud system, sanction screening, regulatory reporting, and payment archive. So right there, once again, referencing the direct capabilities of only a platform that IBM is currently offering. So to exchange FedNow, a ISO 2022 IBM MQ client middleware, and a FedNow service server certificate must be installed on a local server. So if this does not yell white hats, this is 100% America coming into the forefront. So the reason I wanted to highlight this document as the most important document in this entire video is because of this aspect here. The ISO 2022 is requiring IBM infrastructure because of the architecture, and the architecture that is a byproduct of and this architecture in particular has a peer-to-peer aspect to, and this infrastructure and network architecture has allowed for Stellar to develop a payment network based on a peer-to-peer distributed network architecture, which happens to be an open payment network that allows for retail and wholesale to be basically all transacted on one chain, one network, which is Stellar Network, due to IBM's embedded hardware. What that does is that it shows So here we go. So the reason I wanted to point this out as the most important documentation in this entire video is because ISO 2022 is requiring you to have the architecture in place, which happens to be what IBM has focused on, and also happens to be, and with IBM building out and on this architecture is what the Stellar Payment Network was able to design their Stellar Consensus Protocol around, so as to interface with these systems in the most efficient and cost-effective way possible. Now look at this next paragraph. Your financial institution will need you to buy or build a payment application that interfaces with an IBM MQ client and takes FedNow ISO messages all the way through to your core banking system. So here we go, Lumen tied all the way up and down this entire new system. Skip on that. Here's just more IBM integration bus. Okay, now next one up, IBM integration bus solution. This support pack. So the only thing I really took from this was support pack. Pack is the new messaging standard, I believe. Things are going from like MT or MX messages to PAX messages, which is what Swift is putting as the standard now. IBM Hyperledger DTCC. I wanted to talk more about Hyperledger in this, but IBM kind of took it from me since they're the founder of Hyperledger. So here's just more on Hyperledger and how they're tied to the credit derivatives markets in time. So here, just another fun fact, IBM was involved in creating the idea of big databases since 1960. Would you look at that? And even another important topic that I'm not going to get into much here is the World State Database, as I mentioned earlier, which is all 100% Hyperledger Fabric, so more IBM there. Universal Product Identifier Codes, point of sale, retail. This is how IBM is getting embedded into endpoints. This is how Stellar is able to capture real-time payments, because it's actually tied to the software and systems that are performing the transaction and tracking that data in real time. Native smart contracts. Don't think I need to touch much on this anymore, but basically the concept I was showing here was that the XRPL is agnostic, while the Stellar Ledger is required to utilize lumens only to invoke transactions on the network and power the network. So that's a disadvantage between XRP. So that's a very big advantage that Stellar has, especially since it's being used and especially since it's being utilized by the IBM blockchain, which is including the hardware and systems that are underlying the entire financial system. The clearinghouse, just a quick link between So VocalLink was the payment system that was built by the clearinghouse, responsible for clearing 2 trillion. Here it is. The clearinghouse taps IBM for payment systems. So there it is again. IBM being utilized for 2 trillion. All right. There it is again. IBM being utilized for 2 trillion by US. There it is again. IBM being utilized by US Clearinghouse. 2 trillion mentions Power 8 architecture to efficiently process millions of bank payments settled daily. Millions of bank payments. I like the way that sounds. Millions of bank payments. The clearinghouse, IBM, and VocalLink ran an extensive set of performance and resilient tests, sustained 25,000 transactions per second. So VocalLink, I think VocalLink is tied to Visa. VocalLink, Visa. Correct. Oh, actually, it's a MasterCard. It's a MasterCard subsidiary. But regardless, look at the amount of ATMs. That's how you capture real data right there. So just more data on IBM being tied to MasterCard and all these big existing payment systems. If you really want to understand this information, I recommend you do this. You read through some of the BIS papers and then read through some of the IBM papers. Once you read those two, you'll understand some of the technicalities and how the technicalities are being applied into the actual financial aspect of things through how these big banks are testing, piloting, and just overall phasing in these new processes and systems. So one of the important BIS papers I'd recommend you read is the retail versus wholesale. If you don't understand what that is, to put it into a quick, just to give you a quick definition on it. So retail, or when a retail payment if you have a retail system, that is a direct liability to the central bank. In other words, if a merchant performs a transaction, or there's for example, if a merchant performs a transaction, that transaction is directly recorded with the central bank as opposed to going through an intermediary. So what that does is increases visibility in payments that are down the line. In a wholesale system, when a wholesale transaction takes place, let's say a group of merchants perform a transaction, and that transaction was at 1,000. The intermediary would record the 1,000, and then the central bank would record the 1,000 because that is what the intermediary is recording. In the retail, if you had two merchants that each performed 500 to equal 1,000, instead of just equaling the 1,000 on the central bank side, it would equal the two 500s separately because it's directly capturing that information individually. I won't even get to these, but so BIS, PVP versus DVP, another important topic. I'll just touch on this quickly. Payment versus payment and delivery versus payment, which all ties back to securities and how they're transacted. Federal Register. So if you read through the Federal Register, so I had this document here. Let's see if I can pull it up. So if you look directly on the Federal Register, you'll see there's a Commodity Exchange Act. So when I was looking through the Federal Register, I realized something. So here it's talking about swaps, which we already know is talking about IBM, because IBM invented that instrument. Now, I'm not going to get into the details on this, but the only thing I wanted you guys to take from this was, here it is. So commenters supporting the proposed determination argue that settlement risk is the primary risk associated with foreign exchange swaps and forwards. And they state that the settlement of trades through CLS Bank International has largely addressed these concerns. So here we go. In the Federal Register itself, it's discussing this bank, CLS, and it's saying that they've addressed those issues already, whatever issues it's referring to. Now, if we go back, whatever issues it's referring to, so now if we go back to my document here, just right there, gives you guys a clear insight as to this all being tied to IBM. So today there is no standardization in the global currency markets. Banks have to complete the process manually, and this is where ISO 22 comes in. So here it is, CLS IBM partnership. If you don't believe me, so just looking at the Federal Register sheet, so CLS on the Federal Register sheet. So just to prove it, here is the documentation in this paper alone right here. So just to prove it to you guys that CLS is tied to IBM, there's a section here actually where it discusses that directly. So just to prove it to you guys that CLS ties directly to IBM, here's a section on that. So IBM has been able to use this technology to improve performance of various processes. There are some of IBM's financial solutions rethinking global finance. As part of its global offerings, IBM also provides businesses with access to financial services through IBM Global Financing Platform, which is designed primarily for IT hardware, software, and services. So here we go again, IBM in the background. The proof of concept project allows processing a 2-year transaction volume within 2 days. Here it is, talks about it directly, which is the CLS net. The settlement giant CLS is completing testing of its bank payment application based on blockchain technology. CLS, together with IBM, is working on the implementation of the payment network service tied to the blockchain. So there you go. For those that did not believe me on that one, and you guys can have all this documentation as I mentioned. This one just, I can go all day. I'll go all day on this and I won't be able to stop. So, okay, Federer, what else is important here? IBM World Bank, talked about that. Hybrid CBD, so IBM Hyperledger, I won't even go into that. IBM Euroclear. IBM provided Euroclear with design expertise and all platform features, including advanced privacy-preserving tokens and hybrid cloud capabilities. So privacy preserving tokens. And then BNP Paribas, CIB, and other banks that are huge banks. IBM Nexi. Nexi selects IBM to modernize core banking systems or core payment systems. Together with its partner banks, manages 170 million payment cards. And look at this, 1,000 financial clients or 1,000 financial institutions. So some more partnerships. IBM Watson, a monster. IBM Watson is the IBM cognitive platform, which is responsible for all of the fraud data detection, machine learning, deep-based learning processes that belong to IBM. IBM Promontory, working directly with IBM, and so IBM Promontory, initially Stellar will provide the network to facilitate the settlement of transactions cleared on Hyperledger. More documentation. IBM will work with regulators in Promontory, so IBM is actually doing the compliance for you. So there's your regulations. IBM is the regulation. You need IBM to become regulated. If not, you don't have, no other company is working through these foundational issues and fixing them the way IBM is. Here, tying everything back, so here mentioning IBM Watson and its anti-money laundering detection systems, founded in 2001 by U.S. Currency Comptroller, there we go, tied directly to some position in the U.S. government. IBM and R3, so R3 also relying on Linux 1, and so there's R3 as well, also relying on IBM. IBM Fiserv, I believe is how you pronounce it. Point of sale stuff. So I can, as at this point, I don't even have to go through every single document anymore. Just know it's involved with, gosh, everything in the background. Here's Tenemos, which is just more proof of everything relying on IBM, which is again just more information on IBM. And that's because I didn't even touch on some of the other markets that it's tied to. Here's the Food Trust. So here's IBM tied to Lightning Network, Fiserv, I believe it's how you pronounce it, which is the world's leading financial services technology company. 24,000 employees and 12,000 clients across more than 80 countries. And for more proof, many of financial software solutions have embedded IBM software products supporting its core technology. This is wild. This is wild that everything is tied to it. IBM Kyndryl, another company that was that kind of broke off from IBM. IBM did this thing where it split itself up into a lot of companies to dip its hand into a lot of markets. It's tied directly to this bank. IBM Tenemos, tied to that. IBM Finastra, enabling Islamic financial services. So if you saw my first video, first Islamic compliant DLT, here it is, Central Bank of Bahrain, I think you pronounce it. Here's the certificate discussing Stellar. SCB, another one that you'll see in the Twitter posts that I posted earlier, that I showed earlier, that I ran through here. And I ended off with SCB, IBM Z System, 70% of global transactions. So let me find that here for you guys. So again, using the Z System, and the Z System looks like this for you guys that didn't. So just to show you guys again, this is the IBM Z16 system. It's a sweet machine. And here it talks about with 70%, and here it says it here, IBM's systems have formed the technology backbone of the global economy for decades. So this is IBM. So this is SCB from Thailand discussing directly how IBM has been involved in the global economy backbone for decades. Valued by 2/3 of Fortune 100 as a highly secure platform for running their most trusted workloads. With 70% of global transactions on a value basis running on IBM's systems. 70%. Alright guys, so just some ending thoughts. As you saw, this video has taken me a lot of mental effort to put together, and I didn't even get to touch on half of this stuff. So if you guys wanted to see exactly what I'm working with here, this is about 6 months worth of just connecting the dots. So I appreciate you guys for being patient with me. I know I've been promising this for a while now. I hope this information that I just showed you proves. So I hope this information that I showed you was helpful. And just recall, I'm not a financial advisor. All I did is this entire video was show you that everything ties to IBM and blockchain, and provided documentation for every single thing so that you guys can go ahead and spread the technology as well, spread the knowledge. If you haven't yet, click the like button, click to subscribe. It'll help with the algorithm to get it to the right people. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your patience. So with that, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.